Hey guys, week 28, I have 8 reviews and a contest and an update and some Q&A, so I'll hop right into this. The first one I will be reviewing is Deathdream, aka Dead of Night, aka The Night Andy Came Home from Blue Underground. Yeah, this one is a Bob Clark movie. You guys will know Bob Clark from family-friendly movie Christmas Story, sex comedy Porky's, and what I know him best for, his horror movies, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, Black Christmas, and of course Deathdream. Deathdream is actually my favorite of his films. I think it's a masterpiece. Deathdream follows the story of this kind of middle America family who has a son over in Vietnam. They get a telegram that says Andy's not coming home. Something happened. They don't ever say it out loud. It's just the acting, and they just have a breakdown. To their confusion and happiness, Andy comes home that night. But Andy's not quite right. This movie's great. It's a huge allegory for, you know, the people going over to Vietnam and coming back all messed up. They go over as these innocent, sweet, beloved children, and they come back literal monsters. And in this one, he actually is some sort of monster. Andy needs blood to survive, and he needs to inject it. So it turns into like this big drug metaphor at the same time. It's superbly well acted. If it wasn't a horror movie, it probably would have won a bunch of awards, if I say that back in the 70s. Bob Clark does a tremendous job, and he was way ahead of his time. He understands. The movie is not, it doesn't hit you over the head. Like I said this before, it's not like it's like George Romero in the sense that it's all there, but it doesn't necessarily hit you over the head with it. It's an amazing movie. The disc comes with 2 commentaries, one by Bob Clark, who is passed, and one with the Alan, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He's the writer of the movie. He worked on a bunch of stuff, including Popcorn, which he was fired off of, and he worked with Bob Clark for years. He's in Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. But The Night Andy Came Home, it's just my favorite title for it because it fits it. It's such a creepy movie. The horror movie elements are great. The stalking and the way that Andy acts and the way he is completely dead inside. But what's even better is the message in there and the statement on Vietnam, the statement about drug abuse. And there's a great scene of like a generation gap between the soldiers. There's this mailman. He's from World War II, and he starts to talk to Andy, and he's talking about, like, reminiscing in a good way about how great, you know, his buddy got shot in the butt by a crowd. Isn't that hilarious? Yada yada yada. And Andy's just sitting there, dead on the inside and dead on the outside. The performances from the parents are great, and this movie falls apart when Andy comes home and there's something wrong with him. All these, like, underlining surfaces that the families have problems with just explode to the top. There's a drive-in scene, which is perfect for the movie. It's just an underrated movie. I know people like it that have seen it, and I've never heard any complaints about it. It's just not enough people talk about it. Not to be a jerk or anything, but people always talk about the same 5 or 6 movies, like Halloween, Jaws. I mean, they're great, yeah. But so is Deathdream. I mean, Deathdream's just underrated as hell. It came, like I said, it comes with a new interview with the writer and his, I think it was his wife at the time. She's an actress in the movie. Bob Clark commentary, unfortunately he's passed. With David Gregory, I believe, is, narrating the whole thing, or not narrating, but you know what I mean. So there's that in there. I actually wrote a review over at the Screaming Toilet page if you want to check it out. I really enjoyed this one. I didn't talk about much like the technical aspects with it. The movie looks solid, especially for a low budget movie. You know, in a lot of these low budget movies, the darks look dark no matter what. They probably look a little too dark than they should. When the gore happens in it, it looks pretty good. It's Savini's first movie, so there's that too. First movie he worked on. He's not the main special effects guy, but he did work on the movie, and it shows. You know, he was a Vietnam combat photographer, so this probably hit a little close to home for Savini on the set. I don't want to assume things, but I mean, the plot and everything like that. This ending of this movie is one of the most memorable, creepy, strange, original endings ever made. It's just, the movie tears me apart every time I watch it. Super depressing, but super well made, and just, if it wasn't a horror movie, it would be talked about for ages, and I think it's great. Blue Underground did a great job. It's a DVD and a Blu-ray combo. Like I said, some interviews on here, and 2 commentary tracks. Love the hell out of the movie. Love the release.
Andy, Look, I'm not going to dwell on this, but do you know that they sent us a telegram tonight? I mean, they actually sent us a telegram telling us that you were killed.
They actually said that my son was dead.
I was.
I think the human story of Andy, it kind of overwhelms that we were trying to be subtle with a political comment, and I think we were.
What it's really about, of course, is the dynamic in the family.
Yeah.
And representing kind of what that, to me, was that kind of conservative dynamic in the country.
Been through a lot, Ben.
Story of one night in a small town that changed the lives of many and ended the lives of some.
Are you two all right back there?
The next one I'll be reviewing is by Troma. The Thingy. Confessions of a Teenage Placenta. With a title like that, you know it's going to get frickin' weird. And it does get weird. This is a Belgian movie from Belgium. I know a lot of people are asking me, do you like Belgian movies? Well, yeah, I like this one, and I just watched it. So there we go. How to explain this one? Somebody, the reviews said, like Basket Case, it does feel like a Frank Keenan-Lider, like bastardized, like Basket Case sequel, but it's also like dark coming of the age movie. It's a lot of sight gags in here. Let me get into the plot. We have this bodybuilding woman who only seems to inject and work out one of her arms. It's this weird prosthetic, and she gives birth to a baby and a placenta. They decide, well, you know, the baby and the placenta, the whole deal. She gives birth. And they decide, in this world, you can keep the placenta and raise the placenta and get rid of the baby. That's what happens here. And everybody wants to eat this poor placenta, but basically it's a normal kid just in a placenta body. It's very strange. It rises and crawls on the ground. When it moves, when it goes to school, when it gets older, it drives around a little motorized car. A lot of that stuff is, you don't know whether to laugh or to cry or just a mixture of both. It's very dark, but very zany and weird, but also kind of depressing all at the same time. Weird movie. The mother keeps pounding into the Luke, that's the placenta's name, into his head that he needs to be a strong military, and he doesn't have this father figure, so the only people he has around to talk to are these homeless guys and this weird priest. Everybody wants to eat him for his nutrients, so it's just a super bizarre, crazy movie with a really dark and twisted ending. I enjoyed it. It's uncomfortable, it's gross at times, and I felt really sad for the damn placenta, and I think a lot of people will feel the same. It is comedic and dark and gross and weird and pretty cool at the same time. On here is just 10 minutes of deleted scenes. The placenta's a little puppet too, so that I know that will, it's not CGI, so that will, you know, help some people get it. It's practical. And there's some other behind the scenes showing how they made the puppet here and there, and some Troma stuff, you know, like Return to Nukem High trailer, stuff like that. I enjoy the movie. If you watch the trailer and you say, you know, I think I'll like that, I think you will. If you like, it's not necessarily Keenan-Lider, but it has shades of that, but it has shades of like artistic, dark stuff, but zany, gross comedy too. It's The Thingy, Confessions of a Teenage Placenta, aka originally known as The Miracle of Life.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful little baby boy.
He was a teenage placenta. You aren't God.
By the way, do you still breastfeed him?
The next one here is by Arrow. This is Animal Factory with Willem Dafoe and Edward Furlong. Yeah, this it's kind of cool to see him release that one. I hadn't seen it in years, probably since it came out, so, 2001 or so, so 15 years. This is actually directed by Steve Buscemi, which is really cool, and it's based off a book by Edward Bunker, who is, a famous criminal actor. He's Mr. Blue in Reservoir Dogs. He's in a slew of other stuff. He's in The Long Riders. He's in Best of the Best, too. He just pops up in tons of movies. This basically was written by Edward Bunker, a book based on kind of semi-autobiographical stuff, and this is produced by Danny Trejo and Eddie Bunker. So they're both people that serve time. They're both people that know the prison system. So yeah, this movie probably is fairly realistic. It feels realistic. It follows the story of Edward Furlong. This is young Eddie Furlong from Terminator 2 and Brain Scan, who gets sent to this prison. His father, John Hurd, tries to stop it, but he can't. He gets sent to this prison for selling drugs, and he kind of is befriended by Willem Dafoe and his gang, including Danny Trejo, Chris Bear, a bunch of other people in here. There's some other familiar faces. Buscemi's in it, of course. Eddie Bunker's in it, of course, and a really terrifying, really great performance by Tom Arnold. Surprisingly, it's always so nice to see these actors who are always, condensed to these comedic roles, and there's like, oh, you're just a funny guy, or you're just in stupid crap. But Tom Arnold in this movie is horrifying, and he does a great job. He just plays this redneck piece of trash. Great performance, and a really great moment. But what's great about this is the good emotional level in here, especially between Willem Dafoe and Eddie Furlong. They have this relationship, and eventually they plan. I don't want to spoil anything. I'm not even gonna spoil it that much. But at the end, it's really kind of like, damn. But there's a great dramatic moment in here with John Hurd and Edward Furlong, where John Hurd kind of he wants to give these two pictures to him of him and his mother. And he's like, guard, can I give these to my kid? They're behind this door. And he's like, I'm sorry, I can't. Can you give them to my kid? And she says, I can't do that. And the tears in his eyes and that whole moment just made me want to fall down and cry. It was a great scene. There's a lot of great performances. Like I said, it's fairly realistic. It's never boring, but a lot of it's just, how the prison works and stuff like that. Interesting ass movie. I'm a fan of prison movies like Scum and what are some other one? Bad Boys. But this is probably better. I enjoyed this one a lot better than those two. There's a commentary on here with Eddie Bunker and Danny Trejo. That's fun because Eddie Bunker's since passed, and Danny Trejo is just enjoying. He's enjoying watching. He's like, man, I love that scene. I love that actor. I love that stuff. That's really cool in here. Good movie. There's also a little thing about Eddie Bunker on here as well. But really good prison movie that got underseen. It didn't really get the attention it deserves. I think a lot of people with this one coming out will be happy to see it. Good movie. I enjoy the hell out of it. Great performances. And probably, it's just a shame that Edward Furlong is not like, it wasn't the huge, he was for a short time, but his stardom faded out, and it shouldn't have because he's really damn good.
Penal system, it's not to incarcerate, it's to rehabilitate.
Well, you shouldn't come out worse than you went in.
When he began to write, he said that the first thing that inspired him was the lure of crime.
Kick my ass! People have been doing that for as long as I can remember.
If I had wings, I would be a butterfly and I would just fly out the motherfucking window. I would fly across the ocean. You know where I'd go? Where I always wanted to go. I always wanted to go to Paris, France.
The next one here is Satan's Cheerleaders from VCI. This is a Greydon Clark movie. The only Greydon Clark movie I have seen was Without Warning, which I kind of enjoy. Satan's Cheerleaders, yeah. This one was made in the mid-'70s. Here, I'm going to sum this up fairly quick. Take 4 pages of script, take Race with the Devil, take Jack Hill's swinging cheerleaders, and have them kind of stumble into each other and add a bunch of old classic actors, and that's what you get with Satan's Cheerleaders. And I'm not saying it's as good as Satan's Cheerleaders. It's not as good as Swinging Cheerleaders. It's certainly not as good as Race with the Devil. Yeah, basically you have these cheerleaders who get lost on the way to a big football game, and they end up in this town with a bunch of Satanists. There's a bunch of classic actors, John Ireland in here. John Carradine pops up, of course, and, you know, he's fairly good. I must admit, I wasn't a huge fan of the acting in this one. Everybody's hokey. It's supposed to be hokey. It is a comedy horror movie, and it's that kind of hokey silliness. The problem is it's very uneventful. Nothing seems to happen. They have the one scene of nudity in the beginning, and you can tell they're like, we added that in to make everybody happy. But besides that, it's not nearly as sleazy, not as graphic as someone would, you know, imagine. It's just kind of hokey and funny and silly. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of it. There's a point where these 2 dogs are somebody in the one of the Satanists is like, go get them, dogs, in a room. And then John Ireland, every time the guys go back, says, get back there. And it does it like 4 or 5 times. For literally 25 minutes of this hour-and-a-half movie is taken up by these dogs running back and forth. Like I said, there's some funny moments in here. There is some nudity. There's some... I do like the coach of the girls. She's really a fun character. It's just not enough craziness in the movie to warrant it as like a cult classic like it should be with that title. It had the title, and it had the minimum to make people happy, and I think that's what it's known for. Greydon Clark is one of these guys that can make a movie for like $10. He's great at it, and he's a very interesting guy. I enjoy listening to him talk. I've heard him on a podcast. I've listened to the commentary here. It's a great commentary where he talks about how he makes movies, how he working with the actors and actresses. He's a very competent director. It's just the budget really hurts here in script. The script's pretty weak. Dean Cundy actually is the DP on this movie, which blows my mind. He did a bunch of his movies. This is the last one he did with them. There's also a commentary with David Dakota and David Duvall, and that one's fun. That one cracks me up. They talk about a lot of satanic movies, and they kind of poke a little bit of fun at the movie, but they seem to enjoy the movie itself. It is hokey. If you can get past the hokey and you kind of like this stuff, there's the moments that will just make you do this. Like they stop and the sheriff's name on the sign is B.L. Beelzebub, and it's just like, come on, guys. Thinking about it, I have more fond memories thinking about it than I did when I was watching it. It's just a little bit too stale for me. There's 2 prints on here, there's the 2 commentaries, and that's about it. I know a lot of people enjoy this one. It's just not something for me.
1, 2, 3, 4, 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits a dollar. All for Husky, stand up and holler.
Are you sure you girls wouldn't rather play tackle?
First we touch, then tackle, right, girls? Right. Just make sure you don't get hurt while I knock you on your ass.
About people.
I make my boys keep a spotless locker room. I think you'll be impressed. It's all right, there's nobody in here. I don't understand. The door, I mean, you know, like...
Look who's here.
You gotta understand, the sign on the door.
Your players coach, is this what you call it? And
the boys are, but girls are. And look, that's... Oh.
It's all right. Boys will be boys.
Something's just wrong. No.
Say cheese.
What the hell?
Wait till I get my hands on that boy.
That's my job, Coach. Don't worry, I'll straighten him out. Take me. I am in your power. I'm yours. It's so cold here. This place is weird. Look. Look over there. What's that?
May I say to you, Satan, answer me. Kill. Satan, hear me. Destroy them. Destroy them all. Kill. Kill.
What's going on? Come on, get down, girls. You too, Patty. Please, get down, Patty.
Audi fracas meas, satana blasphemy. Audi fracas meas, satana blasphemy.
Well, I'll be damned.
Most likely.
It's all right with the bit of the devil in our eyes.
The next one here is The Ghastlies. Yeah, I was excited to see this one. Everybody knows I love little creature movies. Well, pretty much all the things that I made myself have been little creature movies. So The Ghastlies, I was excited to check it out. It's a low-budget movie from Canada. The guy, I think it's Brett Kelly, he did like 20 movies before. While I was watching it, I was like, oh, this is probably like his first movie while I was watching the movie. But I was surprised to see that he had done a bunch of other stuff. Some of the stuff I had heard about, like Homicycle, this is the first time I've watched any of his movies. We have the story here of these little aliens that crash land on Earth during this satanic ritual. And of course, they run away in the woods. And then we fast forward to 5 years later. Literally 25 to 30 minutes of stuff happens. And the movie's an hour and 15 minutes. And then the creatures start kind of popping up and killing people. So, about this one. I enjoy the creatures. They're made out of foam. The foam furniture stuff, which is the same thing that some of the creatures were in Slimy Little Bastards that I made. So I love the creatures. I have no problem with the low-budget creatures. I have no problem with the practical effects in here. I have no problems with the plot. I love all that kind of stuff. Even the music I have no problem with. To me, I don't want to sound like a jerk. It's such a weird line for me to talk about a low-budget movie that, is very similar to a low-budget movie that I made myself. I didn't particularly like this one. And it's mostly breaks down to, like, the dialogue. There's way too much dialogue. It doesn't seem natural. All the characters, and it's purposely kind of done in a hokey style. And that's not something I like. In the commentary they mention, kind of going like they say Sharknado. People love Sharknado, but when I do it, they hate it. Well, I don't like Sharknado. So when anybody does it, I don't like it. So it's that kind of like self-aware, but also I don't mind the self-aware, but also kind of laughing at the subject matter. Even if they love it, they're making fun of it a little too much for me to enjoy it. I don't mind the creatures, like I said. I like how they look. I'm not thrilled on their laughing because it's all the same laugh on each voice. I'm not thrilled on the acting. Some of the acting's fine. I think some of the leads, like the lead girls in the cabin, are great. Basically, girls go in a cabin and the little creatures attack them in the woods. I think that stuff's really fun. I think their acting's fairly fun. And then a lot of the side characters are atrocious. There's a scene where somebody's talking to themselves, and it's going to be really hard for somebody to come across halfway decent when they're talking to themselves in the woods, and the dialogue's just there and there. It's just really, really painful dialogue. I know that's probably the point, so I'm just basically saying, I'm not necessarily saying this sucks for these reasons. I'm just saying I don't like it for these reasons. Other people may. There's a couple moments that made me laugh, and I appreciate the little creature movie, any little creature movie getting made, because there's not enough of them. Love the cover art. It's just something that really fell flat for me. It's just, I was bored to tears during the whole thing. The dialogue's really painful. The characters are really painful. They don't talk like humans. They don't do anything interesting. Almost everything's an information dump about their backstory, and it's just, who cares? Like, that's how I felt while watching it. On here is, there's a couple music videos, and there's a commentary, and there's a cute little cartoon at the end if you want to stick around. They definitely, worked on a budget, and I can appreciate them doing that. It's just, at the end of the day, it's just, I felt a little bit of insincerity. And I know that not a lot of people like that kind of stuff, but I felt like it was just, especially during a scene where they homage the Gremlins, and it's a very, very obvious homage. I don't like the obvious stuff, and it's like a dialogue verbatim, and it's not funny to me. I don't know. It's one of those things that makes me kind of like, and Satan's Cheerleaders just do. Even though Sheriff Beelzebub made me laugh, not for me. I'm sorry. I wish I loved it. I do not enjoy disliking movies. It's the truth, but I got to be honest with myself and you guys. The next one here is The Heathers. I had seen this one before. It had been about 15 years, so I figured, why not? The Heathers is a huge cult classic, a dark comedy. I probably shouldn't even be talking about it. Everybody's seen it. Winona Ryder, Christian Slater. On the cover here, it cracks me up because they say, without Heathers, there would be no Jawbreaker, no Mean Girls, and certainly no Juno. You should put, without Massacre at Central High, there would be no Heathers, and then the rest of those titles. Because The Heathers is a lot like Massacre at Central High to me, which it's been a while since I've seen that one too. We have Winona Ryder, who's this kind of very popular girl. She's with the Heathers. They're brilliant. The lead Heather is a bitchy, heartless monster, but it is, I believe, high school, so there's that. Christian Slater's the new guy, kind of mysterious, moves into town, and he basically starts manipulating all these Winona Ryder and convincing her to kill people and with him and make it look like a suicide. This paints for some really amazing dialogue, some really hilarious scenes in the movie. And one thing I noticed while watching this, I noticed two people and I said, man, those guys look super familiar, and they're just bit actors. One of the guys in the parking lot is actually the guy in Fright Night 2 who helps Peter Vincent escape, which I spotted. And I said, man, one of those football players looks like the dickhead boyfriend of Night of the Demons. And he was. I couldn't believe that. And I looked up another one, and he was in Ghoulies 3, the other football guy. So it was really nice seeing those kind of bit roles that I wouldn't know their names, but they're there. Glenn Shadix is in it, and that's always great to see him. He plays a preacher. Yeah, I don't know really what much to say about this movie, except that I really enjoy it, and the dialogue is priceless in here. Like high school students don't talk like that, but it's so endlessly quotable. And as the person I was watching with, I was like, high schoolers don't talk like this, but it's satirical. It's a satire of high school, making fun of the whole system, making fun of how deep high schoolers think they are and stuff like that. In a lot of ways, it's really brilliant. It's really hilarious. And there's some moments that you just are so funny, but you feel really bad for laughing. I don't want to spoil anything, but I kind of want to spoil something. All I'm going to say for people that seen the movie is, I love my dead gay son. That part always makes me horribly uncomfortable and laugh at the same time. It's just, there's like that kind of stuff, just getting like these bullies and these jerks, kind of what they deserve, but going way past the line where it's just horrific at the same time. And also, it's about hypocrisy, all these things. They become hypocrites while doing it. But just a very dark high school movie about suicide and basically how these stupid fads, even suicide, will catch on. But it's a great movie. I'm sure most people have seen it, but if you haven't, I'd really check it out. And check out Massacre at Central High.
3 blind mice, 3 blind mice.
Heather Chandler, Heather McNamara, Heather Duke, Veronica Sawyer.
Why are you such a mega brat? Because I can be.
The most powerful clique at Westerberg.
God, Veronica, drool much?
Most people would die to get into it.
Heather number 1 just looked right at me.
I'm worshipped Westerberg, and I'm only a junior.
Veronica would kill to get out of it.
You were nothing before you met me. You were a Girl Scout cookie.
JD has come to answer her prayers.
I'm a no-rest build-up man myself.
We'll kill her.
He's got a way with women. A way with words.
Is this as good for you as it is for me? Life and suck!
And a very special way with a gun. Veronica can't live with him.
Help! I love my dead gay son.
And she can't live without him.
Does this turn out weak or what?
I had at least 70 more people at my funeral.
What?
Their meeting was destiny.
That knife is filthy. What do you think I'm gonna do with it? Take out her tonsils? Ha!
Their love has a body count.
Loved you. Was coming up here to kill you.
That's it. We're breaking up. Young love.
Heather's, a killer comedy.
I'm gonna have to send my SAT scores to San Quentin instead of Stanford.
The next one here, this still has some shrink wrap on it. This is German import of the Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid. This is by Phillip Kaufman, who directed The Wanderers and the 1978 Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I had not seen this movie. It's basically the story of the Jesse and Frank James and the Younger Brothers and the Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid. This is a bizarre movie. It plays as part weird comedy, part serious drama. And it has a weird cast. Cliff Robertson plays Cole Younger. I really enjoy him in it. Matt Clark plays his brother. He plays Bob Younger. Matt Clark is in stuff like The Outlaw, Josie Wales, and Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. R.G. Armstrong plays Cleve Miller in it. Cleve Miller. And he's great in it. He's probably my favorite part in the whole damn movie. And Robert Duvall plays Jesse James. How weird is that? This is, like I said, this is super weird. There's only really a couple moments of really good action. There's a lot of interactions between them and a strange relationship between the gang. They're all in the gang. There's three younger brothers, two the James brothers, and Chadwell, and of course Cleve Miller, played by R.G. Armstrong. And this whole movie kind of leads up to them robbing this bank in Minnesota. These guys, if you guys don't know the story of the James and Younger gang, they were famous outlaws from Missouri, and they kind of continued after the Civil War. There was a lot of border wars going on. There was a lot of unrest and a lot of hate towards the North and the South. They were still going at it. Still a lot of animosity towards each other. And the James brothers and the Younger brothers really hated the Pinkerton Railroad. Really hated a lot of Northerners in the movies and stuff. At least according to these movies. So that's kind of the picture here. It's a very strange time in our history. A very bizarre time in general. But I got to talk about Robert Duvall's performance in here. He plays Jesse James so dislikable and completely insane. I don't know if he's part homosexual in this movie or he's super religious, but there's points where they kind of hint making fun of him for not going with women. He is Jesse James was supposedly very religious, and I believe he was married in real life, so it's strange that he's not married in this one, and they kind of make this weird relationship with him and Chadwell at points. Maybe I'm only seeing that. I don't know, but there's a couple moments here. But Jesse and Frank James in this movie are despicable. Cliff Robertson is likable. Even for a criminal, he comes across very likable in this movie. I enjoyed seeing Matt Clark. I always like seeing Matt Clark, like I said. The performances are really good, except the Robert Duvall one is good, but very bothersome. Very weird, very, very despicable character, and I think it's supposed to be that way. There is a whole giant scene with a baseball scene where it's slapstick, where they witness baseball for the first time, and Cole Younger does. And that scene's kind of goofy and a little out of place, but it's all right. It's very slapstick, all these players falling over and whatnot. And then there's moments of strange brutality where like this lynch mob's chasing the gang, and they stop at this whorehouse and they say everybody out, and they're none of the gang, but they hang them anyways. It goes really dark, and it's all over the place. It's just really bizarre. There's a really iconic picture here that's based on a real picture in history with a couple of the gang who are killed, and they're kind of propped out in front of the coffins. They recreate that scene's really amazing. Like I said, R.G. Armstrong steals the show for me in this one, because he has these couple moments where they go to the whorehouse and he's married, and he's like, man, I shouldn't have done that. I feel real bad about that. And he's like, why'd you do it? He's like, man, I enjoyed it. He's like, I was thinking about it the whole time too, and I didn't even enjoy that when I was doing it because of that. He's a really good character. He's a really good actor. Everybody's seen R.G. Armstrong from horror movies like Beast Within, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, not Children of the Corn, Predator, Stay Hungry, some other stuff, some Peck and Paw stuff like Major Dundee. But he's tremendous in this movie. The movie's really uneven. I enjoyed it, and I think it's a bizarre mixture of genres in a strange time for film, for westerns, and by a director I necessarily wouldn't think of doing a western. But there's a couple moments of action. They're solid, but they're nothing compared to the next movie.
They came riding out of the West like outlaws, and they were the greatest. This is the story of how Cole Younger and Jesse James joined forces for the Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid.
Biggest bank west of Mississippi, Northfield, Minnesota.
Starring Cliff Robertson as Cole Younger. Co-starring Robert Duvall as Jesse James. What were they really like? Cole couldn't resist gadgets and mechanical marvels. He even wore a bullet-retarding vest. Jesse had visions and deep hatreds.
A place called Northfield. Amen.
For 10 long years, Pinkerton and his railroad detectives and all the forces of law and order hunted them like animals. Now, they had come to Northfield, Minnesota, a town as strange to them as they were to it. The Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid.
The next one is Walter Hill's The Long Riders. If I'm going to watch Frank and Jesse James in the Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid, I'm going to watch Jesse and Frank James and the Younger Brothers in Walter Hill's movie, The Long Riders. This was released by Kino. I hadn't seen this in years as well. But this one is the same story. Let me get into the same story as last. And it follows the Younger Brothers, actually played by brothers, the James Brothers, played by brothers, the Ford Brothers, played by brothers, and the Miller Brothers, played by brothers. You got Dennis and Randy Quaid. You got the Carradine brothers, Robert, Keith, and I can't believe David Carradine. And then you got Stacy and James Keach, Christopher Guest, and Nicholas Guest. In here playing all these characters. It's better. I kind of wanted to do a comparison with these two. It improves on a lot of the stuff as the Great Northfield does. It's made a little bit later. Walter Hill's just a much more competent director when it comes to action, and it has those classic slow motion scenes in here that we all love. I think it's better at building dramatic elements between the family and the brothers, and you seem to care a little bit more what happens with the characters. So there's that all going for. I can't believe I forgot to mention. I'm going to say it's a cheat, but Royal Dano is also in the Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid, and he plays this crazy kind of, I don't know if he's drunk, but he plays a crazy guy, and it reminds me of all his other performances. Kind of like seeing that. But The Long Riders, like I said, it's a longer movie. Well, it feels longer. Like I said, follows the story of Frank and Jesse James. The acting's a little bit better, I think, in this one, especially between like guys like Stacy Keach and the Carradine brothers. They do a tremendous job. And when it comes time for the actual Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid, the slow motion in here, the shootouts are tremendous because what they do is you actually feel really horrible when people get shot. It's not just done exactly for action, but when people get shot here, it's very depressing. They also paint Jesse as not exactly perfect, but they paint him more realistically, I think, and a little bit less despicable. But there's a great scene where a lot of the guys are injured, which really happened, and he says, "We got to go." And there's this turmoil between the gang. Really great scene, especially Randy Quaid's face in that scene is tremendous without giving too much away. Watching these both back to back was strange because it's like I want to take some from the other one and mix them kind of both. On the release, like if you're a fan of this movie, the release is great. There's a commentary, but there's a second disc with a bunch of features in here. You get the Stacy and James Keach interviewed on here, which is great to see them because they basically put this whole movie together. It was their idea was using the brothers with brothers and approaching directors and getting this thing made, and they did a hell of a job, and they went a long way to do it, and they did a hell of a job with it. And by adding the brothers, you get a real relationship there, especially, the Carradines do a great job. This is one of those movies where I see David Carradine pop up in like Kung Fu and stuff like that. But in this one, he's so good. Besides the main cast in here as well, you get guys like James Remar, Chris Mulkey, Harry Carey Jr., all sorts of stuff like that. What's that guy's? Peter Jason, they all pop up. But on the features as well, there's interviews with a bunch of the brothers. Randy Quaid's on here getting interviewed. That was interesting to see because, Randy Quaid kind of was in the spotlight for some weird stuff. I didn't really read it. Everybody's like, he's going off the handle, but he seemed fine here. I mean, he thought fondly of the movie and talked about, how this is influenced kind of by Peckinpah and stuff, and he loved Peckinpah growing up, and he wanted to do a Western. And all these guys talk about how much they love Westerns growing up and how much they wanted to do it. There's also like an hour of making of with Walter Hill and Robert Carradine in there talking. There's Carradines interviewed with Keith and Robert talking. And it was really sad then when they start talking about David, who had passed in 2009. But it's a loaded disc. I couldn't believe all the stuff on here. And there's a little featurette on here, Walter here talking about Peckinpah in slow motion, how Peckinpah called him, and he explains Peckinpah is a very standoffish guy. They weren't great friends, but he was one of his idols, and he's just kind of like a scary guy from a lot of what people say. And he says, "I liked your movie," and Walter Hill's like, "Okay." And he's like, what he says is just brilliant. He says, they're saying that your slow motion is a lot like the Wild Bunch's slow motion, that you ripped it off. And he's like, well, no, that's not it, because mine was to add dramatic stuff and make it seem almost like the crashing of a dream, and yours was to add realism. He's like, that's right. He's like, yeah. And it was really great. Walter Hill's a very interesting guy. He's one of the better American directors ever, I think. Well, especially in like the 70s and 80s, making, you know, still making westerns, which is great to see. But he's an interesting guy. He's a smart guy. He talks finally about the movie. The soundtrack in here is a little bit bizarre too. It's by Ry Cooder, who did The Border, which I reviewed a couple weeks ago. And it's an interesting soundtrack. He's a musician. He's not really a guy who makes scores, but it sounds really cool and it feels authentic. And I love that Walter Hill's talking about, this isn't a Western, this is a Midwestern. I don't want these guys to look like cowboys. They're farm boys. They're fighting, you know, this I don't want to say proxy war, it's not the term, but, you know, border war, and they're out to get their Pinkertons, robbing banks, you know. So it's not like a typical Western, but it is a Western at the same time. If you like Walter Hill, if you like Westerns, I really recommend checking this one out. And if you like the James and Jesse and Frank James, check out both of them, but check out this one first.
They were 9 men. They were 4 families of brothers. They rode together from Missouri to Minnesota, and from Texas to Tennessee. They were the most famous outlaw heroes of the West. They were known as the Long Riders. This is their story, and it's as close to the truth as legends can ever be.
Now, you don't give us no trouble, mister.
I want your sons, Mr. Samuel.
What do you want them for?
For robbing banks and trains, ma'am. What do you think your chances are of bringing them in?
It's an amazingly stupid question.
Wait for them to come out.
People say they got one of the youngers.
People say they got the wrong younger.
You men did an excellent job of making heroes out of every one of those gentlemen.
I think I'll write me a book. Make myself even more famous than I am.
You ever been alone?
Excuse me, miss. I was wondering if you cared to dance.
I'd be delighted.
Coming back for you.
We're gonna be meeting up real soon.
They got a real fat bank up there. Scouted it out myself. Northfield.
You open that safe, mister, you hear?
The Pinkerton told us he might be coming. They're robbing the bank!
David, Keith, and Robert Carradine as Cole, Jim, and Bob Younger. James and Stacy Keach as Jesse and Frank James. Dennis and Randy Quaid as Clell and Ed Miller. Christopher and Nicholas Guest as the Ford brothers. The Long Riders.
All right, guys, let me get into the contest. You guys know what it's for. I believe it's for the Mule and Evil Ed. Who's going to win it? John Wilhelm. There you go. This is actually probably going to be the last contest, this next one, just for a little bit, because the holidays are coming up, and I really don't feel like going to the post office. But if you want to enter, it's something really simple, something small. You got to do 3 things. Like the Screaming Toilet Facebook page, leave a comment. Leave a comment on the Screaming Toilet page below. There'll be a link below, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And Over Your Dead Body, just a DVD used copy. It's from Shout. It's a McCabe movie. If you want to do that, just go ahead and add those 3 things. Let me get into the Q&A here. Richard, what, if any, is your favorite zombie film outside the Romero classics? And do I have any thoughts on the Halloween movie coming out next year? Yeah, a bunch of people ask me about the Halloween movie. I don't really have many thoughts. If it looks good and I hear good things, I'll go see it. But as for any zombie movies, I have tons of favorite zombies. That's actually my favorite subgenre of horror, which is a lot of people, probably like, well, that's surprising. I've always loved zombie movies since I was 10 years old. It was my favorite. They were oversaturated, but I love Return of the Living Dead's one of my favorites. Zombies, one of my favorites. Let's Leave the Corpses Alive, one of my favorites. Cemetery Man's one of my favorites. Shaun of the Dead's always always fun. So there's tons and tons and tons. Some low-budget ones, Dead Next Door. Just love zombie movies. John Wilhelm, favorite Empire Studios movie, Non-Full Moon. We're going to have to go with Ghoulies, too, on that one. I believe that's an Empire one, Non-Full Moon. I think From Beyond Us as well, and Prison. Those are all spectacular. And maybe even Reanimator, I think so. But I'll go with Ghoulies, too, because I'm dumb. Nick, my question. Lately, there's been a lot of debate about Hollywood abuse scandals. Do you think that the films directed, produced by people who have been accused of abuse or who are in jail should still be sold? Are we supporting monsters by purchasing their films? That's a tough question. I mean, but you can't stop selling the movies. I mean, there's hundreds of people involved with movies, and it's almost like I don't want to say this. I know they're bad and they're horrible, but it's almost like a weird censorship thing. And you're also punishing people that were involved with the movies and actors and a whole bunch of people for one person. And, you know, I'm kind of against that on nature, just punishing everyone for one person's horrible deeds. You know, I've always been kind of against that. I don't like that. That's like punishing someone if a kid went and saw a movie and he said that's what caused him to shoot up a school. Now no one ever can watch that movie again. It just, I know it's not the same thing. It's not necessarily the same thing. And it's horrible. There needs to be something done. It seems like every 5 minutes somebody's a rapist or a pervert now everywhere. Politicians, religious people, Hollywood, everywhere you look. Somebody's a pervert. Thomas Townsend. What is that sticker or price tag on your shelf edge behind you? I think this is just something I probably pulled off like a case. I was pulling off stickers and I put it there. Now it's going to sit there for 10 years. Matthew Bushwell, my question is, do you have a favorite Criterion release? I think I mentioned that before. Not really. I mean, there's so much good stuff. It's really hard to choose. Sorry, but let's get into the update. I only have 2 titles here. I tried the used thing from Amazon. I picked up Drum. The case came beat the crap, but I replaced it. I picked this one. It's from Kino and Scorpion. It has a bunch of people in it. I wanted to see it because it has Warren Oates in it and Pam Grier. I think that's the only movie they ever did together, so that's really cool. And then Criterion here, McCabe and Mrs. Miller by Robert Altman. Not seen it. Interested in checking it out. Thanks again, guys, for watching, and as always, you guys have a good one.